Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. On the program today, our conversation is on the Monetary Policy Committee's pronouncements, the increase in the monetary policy rate from 12 to 13%, increase, of course, in the cash reserve requirement on private sector deposits from 15 to 20%, which takes immediate effect, and of course the moving of the ban on the naira from 155 to 168 naira to the dollar. Of course, all of these pronouncements we've been looking at and the implications for the economy. I've been having a conversation with an economist and investment banker, Tilewa Adebajo, and the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Mr. Bismarck Rwani. Both gentlemen are still here with me in the studio. Thank you so much for sticking around.
Thank you.
So just before I went on that break, Mr. Bismarck was talking, Mr. Rwani, I beg your pardon, was talking about oil prices and how all of this comes to play. Now, in the eventuality that we remove fuel subsidy, a lot of analysts actually pushing for that, are saying that the government should begin to look at removing fuel subsidy to see how much of that can
be plowed back
into the economy. So, Mr. Adebajo, could you take the conversation up from there?
Yes, I think that's the proverbial elephant in the room that nobody's talking about, and I think it's important that we address this. If you take a look at the oil futures, you find out that most oil futures are now trading at below $70 a barrel. As of this morning, 73. Yes, so, exactly. So, and you find out that the benchmark that we have put in is at about that amount, which is not, because that's a short term. You're looking at other futures going below that amount. So, for me, the key really is when you talk about the subsidy, what you have to do is you are aware. How do you react? You're either proactive or reactionary. And we do not have to be reactionary. We do not have to wait until all this happens before things jolt us up. We're spending $6 billion a year on subsidy payments. If we've done that over the last 4 years, that's about $24 billion we could have had in our excess crude account. The problem is the fact that I see is that we're not saving for a rainy day. There's this mentality that we have to share all the money in the Federation account, and we have not given the excess crude oil account a chance. We've set up a sovereign wealth fund that is supposed to provide some stabilization requirements, but we've only funded the sovereign wealth fund with $1.5 billion. Other oil-producing countries at this time of crisis are relying on their sovereign wealth fund to provide the necessary stability. So in the case of Nigeria, for instance, we have only $2 billion left to protect us from these shocks. From the calculations and the analysis, you need at least $10 billion to be able to manage based on the levels of the Nigerian economy. So where are we going to get $8 billion from? Well, so that's where you now have the deficit that you need to begin to finance, or how you make the adjustments. So how does the government make the adjustments to finance that deficit in terms of what they need to protect or cushion themselves from the effects? Are they going to cut government spending? From what the pronouncements of government, there's nothing. So clearly, something has to happen. This subsidy at $6 billion a year will come in very handy to be able to mitigate this. But is the political will there to remove those subsidies? So the government has frittered away $24 billion over the last 4 years. This is significant. If we had saved this for a rainy day and put maybe half of that into a sovereign wealth fund, we wouldn't have this problem. The governors always want to share the money. $8 billion, they've reduced it to 4, now to 2. Now that we have the crisis, we have the economic headwinds, that amount of money is not there. So the choices government has to be made, not only at the federal level, and I think we have to realize that this situation is not only, but more importantly at the state level, the governors really have to rethink a lot of what they're saying. And I'm happy that the monetary policy pronouncement has said clearly that the governors should start looking at their IGRs instead of dependence on that. That was a fantastic statement from the Monetary Policy Committee. And not only that, but the corporates also have to make their adjustments. Are they going to start laying off staff? Okay, the investors also have to make their adjustments.
Yes, because, sorry, let me just cut you here. Just got a tweet. Somebody says, could you please talk on the resultant effect or the implication of the increase on the general price level and worker salaries?
Well, inflation has come down from 8.6 down to 8.1. That's a good historical trend. What is the impact of inflation going on forward? Inflation expectations are more important than historical inflation. We think that inflation will be stable in November, but from December and January, you're going to see the effect of some of these adjustments. Typically, there'll be an increase in price. Typically, the costs, some of the costs will be passed on to the consumer, some of it will be absorbed.
Yeah, Mr. Adebayo actually said so too.
So, but these are not normal times. Nobody faces a 35% drop in income without having to make some substitution effect and changes. So what are we willing to give up? What are we willing to absorb? Right? And what changes are we willing to make? But more importantly is to know that anybody whose income reduces by 35% is not in the same position as it was previously. So the mental adjustment, the acceptance of the reality that you're not as rich as you used to be, and that even if you're rich, you could be a slightly poor man. And if you were slightly poor, you could be a very poor man, and all of that. It is that reality that nobody wants to accept.
But Mr. Ariwani, yesterday on the program, I had another economist, Mr. Henry Boy, he actually talked about the fact that 5 years ago we had 18,000 naira minimum wage.
Yes.
That's still what we have today.
Yes.
And in reality is on ground. The Central Bank of Nigeria has decided to do the policy arrangements the way it wants to, and then we also have the fiscal aspect as well. All of this, we still have 18,000 naira minimum wage.
But how many workers did you have? You see, marginal wage will multiply by the number of workers. The number of workers in government have multiplied. There are 700 local governments and all sorts of things. So you are multiplying 18,000 with 10 million more people. So the wage bill of the government has increased. The recurrent expenditure has increased. But taking isolated numbers and putting them out of context will always lead to controversial economic outcomes. That's why I'm saying that you can't just take it in isolation.
Well, Mr. Adebayo, let's talk about the excess liquidity. You talked about it a little bit, but let's focus on it, And we know that part of the reasons that was given by the CBN for the tightening was the excess liquidity in the banking system. Now, we know that mopping up of this excess liquidity will stifle the lending to the real sector. And you already said it, there's excess liquidity in this. Even Mr. Riwani actually mentioned it as well. We have excess liquidity in the system. So why was it that interest rate was still high? And now that it's been brought to the fore that we actually had excess liquidity in the system, how is this going to be addressed? We're going to have a mopping up, yes. But then again, we still have other sectors, this domino effect that is going to cascade down.
Well, so interest rates were high. Look, before this meeting, about 2 weeks ago, the Treasury bill auction actually led to a 8.59% rate of stop rate in the Treasury bill auction. This had been as high as 12 or 14%. Once liquidity increases, interest rates come down. But because there's a high marginal propensity to import, some of this liquidity finds its way that way out into the foreign exchange market. Secondly, the difference between your balance of your reserves depletion and your revenue profile has been supported by foreign portfolio investors bringing their money into the country. These guys have started taking their money out. And so you needed to do something drastically to replenish that position. And that is why we're taking these steps to stabilize the economic patient called Nigeria, and so that before it goes into an air ambulance.
Okay, well, you see, my own view on that is very simple. We live in a global economy. In 2011, there was only 2.5 billion of portfolio investors foreign coming into Nigeria. By last year, you had levels of close to $20 billion. The reason is because the American government was tapering, and now that the tapering has stopped, these guys are going to go back home. But the issue of excess liquidity in the system is the fact that we have a problem whereby we are not able to manage our liquidity because the banks are not able to create assets, enough assets on the private sector. And there's an over-dependence on putting assets into government instruments. So if you continue to put assets into government instruments and you're not lending into the real sector, and you can't lend to the real sector at 22% anyway, you have that dilemma. So it's a choice that the government has to make. And that's why I'm saying that the central bank and the Ministry of Finance has to be more proactive to looking at inclusive growth in the economy. We cannot grow this economy at 22%. The excess liquidity tells you that you have more cash and the interest rates are too high. So basically your economy is distorted. And we have to remove those distortions to get the economy to grow.
So, in other words, gentlemen, Nigerians need to tighten their belts.
Squeeze.
Not even just squeeze it.
Yeah.
in the long run. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning on the program.
Thank you.
Well, we've been talking about the MPC's pronouncements and looking at the implications for the economy. Both gentlemen have given their thoughts on this matter, and it still looks to reason, or begs to reason, that the fiscal and the monetary aspects of the economy need to work together to ensure that the nation and the economy as a whole does not suffer. Of course, this is a short to medium term squeezing, as Mr. Adebayo actually said, not a tightening. And in the long run, we expect to see Nigeria's economy stabilize. But that's the program for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Harriet Agbini.